All right, it looks like we've got 7 o'clock. This meeting's called to order. Please rise and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the October meeting of the Swatara Township Planning Commission. We've gone through the call to order and the Pledge of Allegiance. Number 3 on the agenda, the roll call. It looks like we've got all 5 of the Planning Commission members here tonight. So, on to number 4, approval of minutes for the regular meeting held on September 2nd. Those were distributed in our invite to this meeting, so hopefully you got a chance to review those. We're looking for any comments, and if there are none, we'd be looking for a motion to approve those.
I'll approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
A second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Minutes from last month's meeting are approved. Continuing on to number 5, we've got time for public comment. Is there anyone here tonight that wishes to speak?
Hi, my name is Christine Zubek, and I'm here to make comments based on the data centers. First, I want to start by thanking all of you for your time and effort on this planning commission. It's one of those things that I think goes unnoticed sometimes by people, but it's one of the most important jobs an individual in our community can serve. So I want to thank you. I also want to state that I had expressed concerns prior to the zoning change on the data centers for the allowance, just based on, I felt there was not enough research, not enough information presented to be able to decide if that was the right location or appropriate use for those properties in our township. I'm not sure what your involvement was in that, but it's certainly something that I expressed to my board prior to doing that. And I had wished almost that we had this hearing prior to that change being made. But nonetheless, we're here, and I'm happy to be able to present to you some information that I had given to Mr. Golden, which you may or may not have in front of you. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I hope tonight you'll be able to look through some of my suggestions. I've done an extensive amount of research on this issue, both in my professional and private life. And I just want to emphasize that my top responsibility, as I'm sure all of us can agree, is always to the residents of the township. While I'm a strong supporter of economic development and growth in our community, I'm also cognizant of the need for strategic planning, smart growth, and to mitigate overdevelopment. My record on development speaks for itself, with many projects that were started during my tenure on the board as president, and some of which my colleagues opposed. But nonetheless, we got them done. The process was proper, went through the planning commission, and I'm happy to say that those businesses are providing a lot of good economic or revenue to our township coffers today. So I just want to say, there's still time to make changes that are going to protect our residents in Swatara Township. There's still time to do what we should have done, in my opinion, before the zoning changes were made, to really look at some of these issues. And I just want to list just a few. As a local municipality with local control, we need to use our land use authority to set zoning restrictions that take into consideration the location of data centers being built near sensitive areas, require data centers to use sustainable power and water sources, require noise mitigation for cooling systems, and require environmental impact studies for new projects. These actions can address concerns about air and noise pollution, increased traffic, water usage, and grid strain from energy-intensive data centers. We see some of our neighboring municipalities right now that were moving in a certain direction, and then they decided they need more information. Some of them pulled back on the urgency to move forward, because really knowledge is power, and we need to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to bring in economic development, but also to protect our residents. I would like us to look at environmental regulations, which is in my document that I provided, pertaining to water usage, air quality, noise control, impact studies. We can require impact studies to be conducted. I'm requesting that our solicitor in our township and staff come back to the board, either you or our board, with language requiring the following studies: traffic, noise, electric, water, and quality of usage, infrastructure and planning, community benefits. And I look at it this way: revenue is important, but we really need to look at our tax structure and whether or not it is the same as other areas where we were told there was going to be this revenue boom. I don't know that Pennsylvania has the exact same tax structure as other states. Actually, I can tell you it doesn't. It doesn't mean there's not going to be a good revenue influx. I don't know, but I think that we can have projections. People can look at our past performance. They can look at what some same size businesses are doing, data centers are doing in other areas, and they can come up based on us having our tax structure, what that might look like. So I just want to make sure that those things are doing, including an estimated amount that will go to the state, county, school district, and municipality. And, so prior to any project, especially with a project of this scope and magnitude, I would like to request that we are provided an estimate of what financial benefit a municipality will receive with data center location, including estimated business privilege tax revenue, if applicable. In our case it is. Tax based on gross receipts. The BPT is typically calculated based on a business's gross receipts, not profits. A data center's gross receipts would be the total revenue it receives from all sources during an accounting period without subtracting costs or expenses. For a data center, this can include revenue from hosting and co-location services, fees for cloud computing, other data center services, and revenue from specialized services like managed security or consulting. And then also, I would like to know, from an environmental standpoint, what is going to be done with equipment replacement? It's my understanding that much of the equipment can have a lifespan of 15 years, some maybe a little bit more, but I would like our municipality has the ability to do these things, and I would like us to require data center developers to provide an itemized list of equipment that will be required at the facility, lifespan, and replacement plans. I would also like Dauphin County to address how the equipment from data centers will be replaced, dismantled, or disposed of when it has reached its full lifespan upon closure of any data center. And I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And I hope you'll take some of my considerations into consideration as applications, projects come your way. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tuckey. Did you give those already to Zach?
Yes, I did. My apologies.
My apologies.
That's okay. Yes, I did. And
Okay.
He should have a copy to give you. If he doesn't, I can certainly send it to you via email. That'd be great. I appreciate that.
Okay.
And I'm going to just put my name in here because I forgot to do that.
Thank you for those comments. I think we'll touch on probably some of those later, looking ahead further down the agenda this evening. But that certainly was a good start, I guess. So, is there any other members of the public that wish to speak at this time?
Good evening. Tom Connolly, 345 North Harrisburg Street. Some information was submitted at our public meeting, and you have that from a resident, and it covers a lot of the recommendations for best practices, buffers, all the studies from water, electric, sewer, fiber, all those things have been raised at the commission, township commissioner meetings. And I just want to talk about first the tax issue. We had asked the solicitor to provide information, and that would happen tomorrow night. I believe the information was provided to you today. So everyone here is going to get a preview of something that was actually supposed to happen at the township commissioners meeting. It's an interesting scheduling situation that your meeting is the night before the second meeting rather than the night before the first meeting. So it works out. Normally, we would have had the presentation and then your meeting would have already happened. So I think this is the latest your meeting can actually be on the same month that ours meetings are the earliest because of the Tuesday, Wednesday. But I think we're gonna, I heard what Commissioner Zubek said. I'm also interested in the additional taxes, which would be real estate transfer, sale of property, business privilege, EIT, which is earned income tax of employees, local service tax. But the one thing I think that we can estimate and talk about tonight, and I think that's what the solicitor provided or what he was tasked to do, is to provide projected valuation of the property. So the property tax, Commissioner Zubek that spoke before me was interested in some state tax. That won't be, I think, part of the discussion because the property tax is county, school district, township. Not to say that there aren't other taxes, but I just want to clear up something because I had a couple residents send something to me. In other states, they have a personal property tax that's on the value of your personal property or the value of the contents inside of a business or a home. We don't have that here in Pennsylvania, but it would have been state level anyway. So that's not having that tax does not affect any revenue for the township. And it should be noted that the property tax is just going to be the valuation of the building, then based on the millage rates that are currently in effect for Swatara Township, Dauphin County, and the school district. And the other thing I want to clear up is recently we saw a neighboring township on the West Shore that it appeared attempted to add a zone that was called office park or office zone to the list for data centers. That township already had approved data centers in areas of the township. And I don't know if you had a chance to review it, but because it was on the news, their map was posted. And if you look at their map, other than the fact that they have a different shape that's almost rectangular, their data centers, their data centers are two gray areas in the lower part of the map. And I think when Zach does his presentation later and puts our map up, ironically, very similar to the areas, they look bigger, I don't know on square footage, and I think that township, Hampton, is a little bigger than ours. But if you see, they had those gray areas, just like we have two areas, which you have to have some area to comply with the law. So it's very similar. But they were looking at adding, I just saw it in the last week. Zach, can you either make that smaller or scroll down to the, I think it's the blue area in the center, I think was the area of contention the other night. They were looking to add another area in their township. I don't know. My speculation is because they have that office park and they're worried about blight with people working from home. So they don't want to have, we have some similar situations trying to find tenants in the tech port, but that is a big office area. I don't want to speak for them, but I think that may have been what they were doing, but they decided not to do that. I want to be very clear here. We picked two small areas that make the most sense in Swatara Township. We're required by law to pick an area to protect the township, to protect the residents at large. So we selected two areas. It had gone through the Planning Commission conversations about data center. We gave it to the Board of Commissioners. We gave it to the solicitor. The solicitor came back with those areas to comply with the law. We felt we were in a race against time. There have been conversations about one area already possibly being pursued as a data center. We had no regulations. So our board acted as quickly as we could to protect the residents, to define the areas that data centers would go in. If you look there, those two gray areas on the map are the two areas that the data centers went in. Overall map, it's very minimal, but if you live near it, it concerns you. If you're against them anywhere, then it didn't matter where it went. But to come back with the suggestion that we should be looking at commercial and industrial, which I think the way we list it, it would be the gray is the bottom color on that key. I think everyone's closer to a map than me right now. But so you're talking the next 5 colors going up. That's the whole heart of the township. It has been suggested at a commissioners meeting that we look at all of those areas. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm opposed to that. I'm just one vote, but I'm here as a citizen. That's way too much area. We're looking at putting these regulations in the small area that the commissioners already voted to put it in. So I'm just saying right now, I don't have a vote on your board. I don't know where the discussion is going to go. But if you saw what happened with a neighboring community, they picked something in the heart of the township and then it didn't go anywhere. I don't see that going anywhere with our board of commissioners. So we'd be talking about regulating those areas. And I'll just let it go there. I worked with Zach as like the liaison between what was requested in our public meetings or by our commissioners. Differing opinions, and I think his presentation is going to be all encompassing. And then we want to hear from the public what they're interested in. If they want additional areas, that I think anything can be suggested tonight. So, having said that, I appreciate the time. Certainly appreciate the work you do. It's not easy, and on a night when you didn't have a plan on the agenda, you're being good sports and having the meeting on topics that are important to the township. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Connolly. I guess one thing to note is, was it the same member of the public? I think that might have been at our meeting last month, and I think we've already received that list.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that you presented the information to us.
I think we get the same information.
And we gave it to Zach, and because of the way we use it, I just wanted to make sure that you got it. So thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, Michael Tuckey. All I have to say is, after what was just stated, no one on the board, I myself, I know I did not request another area in our township to have data centers, and I know Commissioner Zubek did not either. So I don't know who the other commissioners were that requested this, but there was no request that I'm aware of for other data centers. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, looks like data centers are already a hot topic tonight. Is there anyone else, members of the public, that wishes to speak at this time? Like we said, we've got some further down the agenda, probably some more opportunities to hear some thoughts when we get there. But going down through number 6, old business, doesn't look like we have any tonight. Also number 7, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, but we don't have any new plans to review. We've gotten through the ones so far this year. So moving on to number 8, other business. Under number 8A, the code discussion on buffer yards and planting screens.
All
I
right.
would say at this point, I'm kind of looking for your presentation or what you've got prepared to start things off.
So Commissioner Connolly and I thought it was pretty rare that we don't have any plans being presented and not in the queue right now. So we had an extra meeting to kind of discuss, I believe, some hot topics. And, one of the hot topics right now are buffer yards and planting screenings. So we thought we would go over, I didn't want to do a whole lot tonight because we all start to glaze over after a while, but I have 3 different plans that have been approved. One is 1065 High Spire Road. It's better known as the Eisenhower Business Center. Next is 8190 Chambers Hill Road. This is GW Signs. So those 2 are almost at full completion. So we're going to look at some overviews, some aerials, and see, is our current buffer ordinance working? Does it look like it's working? So we can do some real life examples. And also we wanted to talk about Wawa at 9009 Bridge Road. We're going to look at the most recent landscape plan. Of course, it's not built yet, but I still think it's a significant plan that we should review. So let's start with the code discussion on the buffer yards and plantings. So first, let me pull up 1065 High Spire Road, and please interrupt me if you have any questions. This is pretty laissez-faire. We'll just talk as we want to. It's not set in stone anyway. So here's a little bit better map here. So this is the Eisenhower Business Center. This plan was approved by the Board of Commissioners on April 12th, 2023. The zoning is the general commercial, and it's surrounded by other general commercial properties. The approved zoning use was office with accessory storage per the land development plan. Eisenhower Boulevard is on one side, which you can see is to the west, and then High Spire Road is on another, that's to the east. There were 2 waivers that were approved. One was the submission of a separate preliminary plan and a separate drawing of the proposed lot, which I actually think that meant the scale of the proposed drawing on the front page. So let me, as you can see now, the zoning map, let me pull over to an overview that was actually taken today. So it's very up to date. As you can see, Eisenhower Boulevard's on your left, and then High Spire is on your right. So we kind of did a review. What are some maybe plan deficiencies that were overlooked at the various levels? We're not putting blame on anybody, Planning Commission, Board of Commissioners, or the zoning officer. It's just things that maybe improving our planning processes in the future. So the one thing that was just glaring off the beginning was sidewalks. And I looked back and there was not a sidewalk deferral, there wasn't a sidewalk waiver or a sidewalk modification. I could not find a sidewalk fee in lieu, so it might have just been missed. So as our subdivision land development states, our saldo, per 253.32, sidewalk, curb, and gutters were required along the property line, along High Spire and Eisenhower. I can understand why the sidewalk wasn't put on Eisenhower Boulevard because the terrain's a little bumpy there. But High Spire, I would have made a recommendation at least, put sidewalk, curb, and gutter along High Spire. If not, I think the township could have easily got sidewalk fee in lieu of. However, that was missed for whatever reason. So also, there were to be 3 additional landscape islands in the parking area adjacent to the building. As our ordinance states, every 15 spaces requires 1 parking island. So parking island, I say these landscape little bump outs here. I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen. They were not included along the building. Let's see. The code says if a principal business use will include areas with loading docks, the buffer yard shall increase to 70 feet, and then 8-foot tall tree plantings are required. I looked over the plan today, and all the plantings were shown only at 6 to 7 foot tall. So there was a missed opportunity there to better buffer the residential areas along High Spire Road and along the northern border here. There's a residential property right there. Now it is all commercial use. However, our code's very specific. It states that either a residential zone or a residential use, you still have to provide buffers. As you can see, it kind of doesn't give itself a lot of credit here, but the trees are pretty small. I'm not sure if they were planted to spec per the land development plan, but I just wanted to show you that. One thing I also did notice as well, however, we are holding a bond still. It looks like the landscaping around the stormwater basin was never completed. There was a ton of trees that were approved on this southern area of the basin. The basin's right here. I don't know if you can see my mouse on the western portion of the property. How our ordinance actually reads is the landscaping buffer for a stormwater basin is actually supposed to go around the basin and specifically along the road. And as you can see, that was never added to the plan. I'm not sure how that got missed, but it did. Are there any particular questions on this one?
I guess going back to this one, and it's been a few years now, like you said, in construction. Was this the one that the site was actually flipped? Like they started construction with an approved plan, and then I can't recall exactly what they ran into, but they came back to us again with a pretty large change.
I believe they were proposing.
They were shut down. I think they were shut down for some time.
They were.
DEP, or they started working without a permit, I think.
They started working on the stormwater basin. They connected it into the highway or PennDOT's pipe without permits.
That was the issue, and so they flipped to the location of the building on the site to not have to tie in PennDOT's system. Okay.
And I believe it was my understanding with the prior zoning officer that there was proposed parking underground in the beginning. Am I mixing up the sites?
I don't think it was parking. I think it might have been pervious pavement.
Maybe that's what it was.
On some of that to with the layout of the site. I think they were trying to claim some credits for pervious pavement.
Yeah. One thing I would recommend, so you see there's a playground here. One thing that, there is a dip here, so it kind of makes sense why landscaping wasn't put there. However, it's my opinion that landscaping should be provided along any residential property, and especially playgrounds, to be buffered from this use. Any other questions on this one? Just wanted to kind of go over some properties.
No, I think that's helpful to see. I guess for our benefit, what stage of the process is, or I guess what percentage of construction complete is this project?
It's pretty close to completion. We're holding over $50,000 right now of financial security. Like I said, there's a lot of missing trees. There's some other issues with the stormwater basins, my understanding. They have applied for zoning and building permits, however, that's where they're now. Okay. Any other questions?
No, I'm sorry.
I think they're putting their sprinkler system in right now too. The shell is not officially, the occupancy permit has not officially been released because the sprinkler is just getting permitted.
Okay.
Anything I missed?
I think it's a good overview. From residents, the concern was, I think you can't see it from this end, but I think there was a retaining wall that somebody had asked
right here.
in relationship to a project on the 165 acres off Mushroom Hill about heights of retaining walls, and I think we had a different angle picture. And then the other thing was the concern about the narrow buffer in the front here from, I can't tell from looking at that how wide it is, but along High Spire Road. You have a bigger buffer the other way, but that makes sense of what you said about there's something in that grass area between this construction and Eisenhower that prevented them from being able to build there. So is that a pipeline? Is it gas or is it?
It was a pipeline.
Okay. Yeah,
And just for edification, and I'm not sure if you were here at the time, Zach, but there was already an existing building there before. And actually, PennDOT had come back and had requested some traffic changes in the area too. So there was actually a significant amount of change, I believe, to provide for a proper turning radius for trucks coming in and out.
Okay. Yeah, so this just gives an overview. I am concerned about this property. The use was approved as office with accessory storage. However, if you look at the building, you can kind of come to your own conclusions if it's office with accessory storage.
We do have a question. Did you have a question in the
I
back
was
there?
just wondering, does the township plan to hold the, bond, that's $50,000 worth of trees, it's easy to blow through, and hold the occupancy certs?
Absolutely.
And hold them until they're, okay,
100%. Yep. And any other municipality, they would do the same thing.
yes,
Yep.
and there are other permits that they might be asking, or what are they under?
So this is supposedly it's an office with accessory storage. But if you've ever been out there, you can see it's a massive office building if it is an office building.
Who's the holding company that's pulling these permits for them? Are you approving, do they have some coming down the line that need approval?
So I will say you can come to the zoning hearing board meeting on October 28th. I denied a permit for a distribution center here. So you can come see what the zoning hearing board does about that. Another missed thing, you see this large area along the road. There should have been some kind of landscaping here, but just my recommendations now, looking back. It's not much we can do now. Any other questions from the public? Good questions. All right, so the second one we wanted to talk about briefly is GW signs. Talking about completion, they're almost done. They are putting in some more trees that's required. Let me see, here's the zoning map. Let's start with this, and then I'll get into that as well. All right, so this is better known as GW signs. The plan was approved on September 13th, 2023. The zoning is general commercial and surrounded by single-family residential on the western and southern property boundaries. And then there's general commercial on the north along 322 Paxton Street. The zoning use was approved on the land development plan as retail sales. As we all know, they're a sign company, so it makes sense. There were 2 dimensional variances granted by the zoning hearing board to fit the building on the site. It is a very tight site, so they needed the variances to put the size building they wanted to put on. They received a rear yard setback of 20 feet instead of 40 feet. Now, what was interesting about this was they considered Chambers Hill Road as their rear yard, which per our code, if I'm reading it correctly, and I think I am, this is a corner lot. So it has 2 front yards, which is Paxton Street and Chambers Hill Road, and it has a side yard abutting this residential property on the west. So it actually doesn't have a rear yard. It has 2 front yards and 1 side yard. So it was interesting that it was approved that way. And then the rear yard, they said, was 10 feet instead of the required 60 foot. So they called Chambers Hill Road the rear yard, which they were given a 60-foot buffer instead of, or they were given a 10-foot buffer instead of the required 60 foot.
So from those numbers, you're saying the rear buffer, the required rear buffer is larger than the required front buffer.
So technically, since this is a corner lot, they do not have a rear yard. But the zoning
they actually made it more restrictive with the way they...
No, so I probably said it backwards. So they're saying the rear yard setback, they approved a 10 foot instead of a 60.
Okay.
So technically, the zoning officer at that time made a determination that Chambers Hill Road was their rear yard. So instead of a 60-foot buffer, they allowed it to be 10 foot.
What's a front yard buffer?
The requirement?
Yeah.
I don't know what the requirement is. I just had the variances. It should be. Yeah, the side yard is supposed to be 40, the rear yard is supposed to be 60.
Oh, okay. My apologies. I thought when you mentioned the side yard, I thought you said that was the front yard.
I actually believe it's 80 foot for 322. I think Paxton Street has its own determination, a separate determination if it's along certain roads, such as Eisenhower Boulevard, Chambers Hill Road. I think it's Paxton Street 322. I think it's 80 foot.
That makes sense since it's an arterial.
Yeah. Okay, so 3 waivers were granted. One was a submission of a separate preliminary plan, which is common, a sidewalk deferral, and there was to be a fee in lieu of paid instead, and then the scale of the plan. So let's get our nice drone overview here. Okay, so here's 322 to your south, Chambers Hill Road to your north. So I just did a review of the plan. Again, I'm not pointing fingers at the prior zoning officer or anything, but there are a few planning deficiencies. The one we just talked about, this is a corner lot as defined in our zoning ordinance. There was an amendment to the definitions of corner lots and everything. However, the old definition still included this as a corner lot. So let's see. Oh, so they are required to plant street trees. Let me pull up the plan. They have not planted the vast majority of plantings yet. However, I'll show you what the land development plan was approved for. I believe it's page 8. Bear with me, folks. And while I'm pulling this up, going back to the first plan, do you feel there's any best practices that we can, try to avoid in the future? And are there any things you think we should improve on? So that's pretty much the purpose of this discussion, to see if we can improve our ordinances.
Is there any comments from the other members of the planning commission?
I think it would be helpful to have, when we're reviewing these plans, to have key ordinances, and key zoning rules, kind of a key that we can follow, a checklist.
Like a checklist, yeah.
Of the big, most often missed items that we could put forth for review.
All right, good idea.
Yes, I think that would be helpful.
There's a lot of nuances
Yeah.
and a lot of things, for example, the corner lot or, certain placements on arterial roadways. So I think if we have a checklist, that would be helpful.
Okay. Any other ideas? Well, I did find the plan though.
I think it's been helpful, and I think the previous zoning officer had started doing it. I know you've been doing it, giving a summary from your review of kind of the relevant areas that it covers from our zoning code, just kind of showing how it meets that requirement.
Sure.
I think that's been helpful summary, at least from a starting point.
Sure.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the staff feedback prior to bringing the plans to us, and as well as Mr. Duke's input,
Yeah.
as well as very helpful coming from the county's perspective.
Definitely. All right, so here is the landscape plan for GW signs. So per our code, they were required to do a 30-foot buffer on the western property boundary because this is the RS zoning district. So as you can see, there were a couple trees, and then the vast majority were evergreen trees. Also, they did provide, I believe these are supposed to be street trees. You're required so many street trees per linear footage. Per the other map that I had up, they have not yet put those up there, but rest assured, we have their financial security, so we'll make sure they do it. So one kind of maybe potential solution in the future, what we could maybe look at, they were not required to provide front yard buffers along Chambers Hill Road, as buffers are only required on abutting non-residential properties in the side and rear yards. I know there was a concern from one of our commissioners, and it was rightfully so. They had a really bright light along these walls here. So at nighttime, it was actually blinding. Our interim manager actually went out and looked at it one night, and it was extremely blinding. Luckily, we spoke with the property owners. They were willing to make some changes, but that could have been avoided if we had some kind of a buffering in the front yards. Now I know we can't go crazy because you want to have the front yard visible for emergency management operations. However, we still, especially with non-residential properties, you want to have some kind of a buffering from the road, so you don't see along 322 particular warehouse after warehouse after warehouse. You can see nice street trees and other kind of evergreen trees. What are your thoughts about this?
I think in terms of buffer yards, or at least some of the things you focused on, like with plantings and stuff, I don't know that we've really spent a lot of time on that on our reviews. A lot of the reviews centered more on either, you know, the appropriateness of the facility for the location, traffic, some of those things. So I guess, is there anything, I guess, in terms of, at one point I think there was like a shade tree committee or something within the township. Like, is there any further
I believe
analysis outside of like just what our township engineer is doing as far as a review?
I think our shade tree chairperson's in the audience.
I can answer that question. I mean, most municipalities have an actual shade tree commission. In our township, it's a committee. I know the prior chair never really took much of an interest in it either. It's not that there's not an interest. I've actually been looking at some in passing, but that doesn't address your concerns because a shade tree is already an existing tree that you're looking to protect. So where you have an area where there's no trees at all, the shade tree committee would not even have any impact on those decisions.
Understood. Okay. I was just curious on that.
Okay, so do you see any kind of best practices here, or where can we improve? You know, where do we maybe mess up a little bit? What are your thoughts?
So I guess where does that one stand in terms of completion? Like, have they been made aware of?
This is about 98% complete.
With no plantings so far? Is that, I guess, the main point of discussion with your codes office? So,
Yeah, they are active. So basically what they're missing right now are the street trees, if we can call them street trees, and they're missing, let me pull up the map actually. And they're missing the buffer. So we are working actively with the Wilkinsons. They were supposed to be planting them literally this week and last week. And they also were missing their trash enclosure. They're supposed to, per our code, they're supposed to be covered on 3 sides. I want to make a recommendation in this year's proposed text amendment, if we get to that at some point this year, hopefully, that they enclose it on all 4 sides. This makes it more attractive, especially when you have big developments, especially when it's abutting residential neighborhoods. To have.
I have a question. Am I allowed to ask a question?
That's up to the chair.
yeah, I think that's fine as long as we can do it early.
How can you go through and do a text amendment after the plan's already been approved?
No, so what I mean is the planning commission likes to do a text package every year to present to the board of commissioners. It wouldn't affect this property, but it would affect future properties.
And then also, if I'm not mistaken, there was an extreme amount of rain during the time where they were doing their, some of their land work and things like that. So they were unable to do a lot of things until very, very late. Can you tell me exactly, I think it's just recently that they've completed a lot of their things just because of the rainy season that we've had.
Correct.
Okay.
But technically it's supposed to be completed before a structure is occupied.
Oversight on their part, because it was my understanding, and I'd been interested to see what the timeline on this was as well, and I was told that they were kind of set back a little bit because of the rain, and you can't really move dirt and do things and do planting and all that stuff when it's one big mud pit.
Yeah, and they were on a time crunch with PennDOT. They just received we just received a permit application from, I think they're called Farnhart, who does excavation and things like that. Their old building is going to be demoed any day now.
It's down.
Is it down already?
Yeah.
I have no doubt, though.
They weren't even approved yet.
They've always been a great business partner in our community.
Yeah.
I have no doubt that they'll complete the project.
No, they will.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely will.
Thank you for letting me speak.
Sure. I think it's helpful seeing some of these photos. I mean, a lot of the plans, we see the plan at its final completion with some few minor wrap-up items, and then a lot of times we're not seeing really any of the completed sites unless, you know, we go out there ourselves and look at them. So it's helpful knowing what's, say, coming across your desk, or what, when you're doing your inspections and issuing final permits, what's might be, you know, not being done out there.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Jack Harlacher. He took these pictures today, so they're fresh, and yeah, these are great. I think I agree 100%. To look at projects after they're complete and do an evaluation. I think that's best planning practices, so maybe that's something we can do moving forward. Any other questions on GW signs? All right, to the last one, then we'll get to the meat and potatoes of the meeting. I know that's why everyone's here. So let's see. There we go. And this is 9009 Bridge Street, better known as Haas's, better known as Wawa. So this plan was approved on October 9th, 2024. The zoning is limited commercial, surrounded by general commercial and conservation to the south, and limited commercial to the north and to the east. An approved zoning use was auto service stations with fuel pumps. A convenience store with gasoline fueling operations became a permitted use in the CL district, the commercial limited, after the Board of Commissioners adopted a text change to the zoning ordinance in 2022. This is another corner lot, so another unique property with 2 front yards abutting 322, and then a front yard abutting Bridge Street. And then the side yard technically is abutting this property to the east. There were 2 waivers approved. One was a submission of the preliminary plan, which is common, and also common the scale of the plan. So since we can't do an aerial of the property right now because it's being constructed, I will pull up the landscape plan. And my apologies, I should have pulled this up before. Page 17, at least have the page number. Of course, it's gonna go slow. All right, good. It's a little faster. Apologies. There we go. Try to zoom in a little bit. So with GW signs in this one, it's really amazing that they received PennDOT approval because of the tightness of and the unique location of the driveway and why is this not working? There we go. So they can definitely count their blessings that they were approved by PennDOT.
Definitely took, what, a year plus?
Took forever.
Until they got the decel lane from 322.
Yeah, and it was changed a couple times, and they had to put in this pedestrian access across the street, and a couple other things I'll talk about here in a minute. So one thing I saw in the plan was they should have recommended street trees along 322. The street tree ordinance does not differentiate between a highway or an arterial or a local. You're required to do street trees regardless of what the street is. However, other landscaping does seem to comply with the ordinance, especially given the small site. But one of the major concerns that I would have had, and I think people did have at the time, was over 50% of this property is and was located in the floodplain. They spent over a year with FEMA trying to get approval of a floodplain permit because this is the Swatara Creek. The applicant is mitigating the hazard by placing the finished floor at an elevation above the flood elevation. They also have provided an extensive report indicating there will not cause a significant rise in the floodwater elevation during flood events. I'm not a flood expert, but if you put that much fill in a site, I would think it would rise the creek by a little bit, but the floodplain, the FEMA said it wouldn't. So it was ultimately accepted by FEMA. Another challenge faced by the applicant at that time was access to the site from US Route 322. The applicant worked with PennDOT for an engineering solution and will now provide an exit ramp and turning lane on the Bridge Road to the entrance to the site. They did have to reduce the fuel pumps positions, and also they had to reduce the amount of fuel pumps to 16 to 12. So this one had a lot of hoops to overcome, zoning text amendment, FEMA floodplain, and PennDOT approval. However, it was put in place. The status of the project right now, they just installed their required retaining wall along the creek. That had extensive engineering into it because of the floods. They're about to finalize their building permit with that retaining wall. They did officially apply for their building and zoning permits. I approved the zoning permit as it complied with the land development plan, and the building permit is in review with Approved Code Services as we speak. I know there's been some accidents here already, so that's concerning that there's already accidents at construction time. So we'll see what happens when the development is full blast with people coming in and out every day.
Where were the approximate accidents on Bridge Street, I'm guessing?
I believe it was on 322.
So I actually think the project makes that better, because prior to this project, there was no turning lane at all.
People are
were
slowing
along the
down,
front of the road.
right.
So there's always been accidents there, but I actually think the improvements are better, and PennDOT worked with them extensively to achieve that thing. And then also just to point out, along 322, that was where the hostage used to be. There were never any trees as a buffer along 322, and I guess that would most likely be up to PennDOT. But I know that PennDOT doesn't like to have a lot of things in their right of way, so that might be a reason why it was never done to begin with.
Yeah, one of the major, I believe, concerned parties was this Hummelstown
Hummelstown
Borough.
had some concerns, but they've all been addressed.
They're still concerned because they reach out to me once in a while about it regarding truck traffic turning right going into Hummelstown. I know there's a sign there.
I know they showed up at one of our meetings and they thanked us for all the changes. So
Yeah, they're still concerned there's going to be a sign there. However, the mayor in particular was concerned about the truck traffic. Any thoughts?
I guess the only question was where would, I guess on the topic of like landscaping and buffers there, like along 322, where would have they put something on that site outside of, I think the line you've got shown there is PennDOT right away kind of down that slope, like.
Yeah, I've never heard of, I'm not saying Commissioner Zubek's incorrect, but I've never heard of PennDOT dictating street trees. What they dictate is,
I didn't say they would just dictate
Signs.
street trees. I said that they dictate what's in their right of way.
within the right of way,
If you're
yeah.
coming down 322, you're never going to even see that that's there if you have it blocked. So it doesn't seem. I mean, I've passed plenty of places on highways 322, especially where there's not any trees.
It depends on the zoning.
Yeah, of course it depends on the zoning. But just to add also, that site was never, the building itself and the pumps were never in the floodplain. The proposal from, I do know this, the proposal from the outset was everything was going to be above the floodplain. It was never below the floodplain. And I can guarantee that.
I can actually show you on the plan, it was in the
The
floodplain.
initial plan was never in the floodplain, and they came to us and they did a presentation at our Board of Commissioners meeting at the time, and they addressed all of those questions. And in that area at one time, there was a 500-year flood, and if you're basing your assessment on a 500-year flood, well, that happens every 500 years. And at that particular flood, all of Hummelstown was underwater, including like East Park, like that whole area down at the end of Hummelstown, everything was underwater that year.
Right.
We had 3 hurricanes converge.
I hate to disagree with you, but on their own plan,
You weren't here, so.
no, wait a second. On their own plan that was recorded at the land development plan, this is the recorded land development plan. Here is you see this blue line? This is the FEMA floodplain.
You weren't at the meeting when they said that they were going to raise everything above the floodplain.
Correct, they are.
Okay.
But
They were going to do that initially, and they said they would, and I have the presentation to share with you.
That was
Yeah.
the old Haas's.
I'm sure you can.
For clarification, I think what you're referring to.
No, I'm referring to the original plan.
You're both, right, I think you're talking about the gas pumps
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
Because
talking
I
about,
obviously
the
out there too.
important thing is the gas pumps.
So that's what, that's, yeah.
There was
that's what I thought
extensive
you were-
I
conversation.
think the gas pumps are above flood, and the building is not.
He's right, he's talking about the building is
But
part
the building
in it.
itself, they already said they were gonna have the shutters where they automatically, the
But
building's
it's not,
protected.
I'm just saying, he's saying that the building was in the floodplain, which
Correct.
it shows on there.
Yeah.
You're talking about the gas pumps, which are not, which is correct, like, you're both right.
Yeah.
You know, there's an important part.
You're correct that the gas pumps and the new building is not going to be in the floodplain because they're rising it so much. But the previous building, as you can see from the land development plan, and I approved their floodplain permit literally today, as the floodplain administrator, was 100% in the floodplain. As you can see, you see all their parking.
The argument initially was just the pumps, and we were assured that the pumps were never going to put.
No, they're not
That
going to
was
be.
a point of discussion, I think,
Yeah.
several times at our planning commission meeting, what was being done, knowing this site was in a flood-prone area, and some of the things that they had discussed of how they have, their tanks,
Buoyancy of the buoy, yeah.
discussing the buoyancy of their tanks or how they account for that,
Yeah.
Their venting system, the height of that to make sure it's out of the floodplain and so forth.
I think this actually brings up a really good point. The township will be receiving a new model ordinance in the future, very soon. So some municipalities, rightfully so, in my opinion, prohibit any kind of development within floodplains, because any kind of development within a floodplain is you're affecting the downstream. Even though FEMA, they can spend $100,000 on studies that say, oh, it's not going to rise, it's ultimately going to cause some kind of disruption down the
Right,
stream.
I think like as Commissioner Zubek had said, you get a 500-year storm and
Doesn't matter.
suddenly everything's underwater and calculations for 100 years didn't exactly mean much when you get a 500-year storm.
Yep, but that will be a discussion for our board to have when the FEMA floodplain maps are updated.
So they did a Clomar, then I'm guessing.
Yep, a Lomar.
Went through that.
Yep.
Or Lomar, yeah.
Lomar, yep. Yeah, I literally just approved their floodplain permit today. Anything else? Any public comments?
Well, I would just say, I'm just gonna go on record right now and say that I caution everybody, including you and our entire board, on telling somebody what they can do with their property as long as they pass all of the legal muster, so. And I don't, yeah.
Anything else? All
Thanks
right.
for those examples, I guess. Was there anything specific that you were looking in terms of our ordinance, I guess? Some of those were citing examples of, issues with the final product, maybe some things that were overlooked that we need to consider applying what's already there. I guess, was there anything that you think is specifically related to buffer yards or screenings that you'd like to see in our ordinance? I guess
I think
kind of where are we
yeah.
trying to go with the discussion, or
I still feel that we have a very strong buffer ordinance specifically related to commercial properties, industrial, non-residential, I should say, with budding residential properties. I think what we should really do, though, all of us, is do a better look at the
kind of you're
plans.
saying trying to call attention to what we
Yeah.
have, and there's a lot of things that get considered in a plan, and everybody's kind of got their own area of what they focus on, and maybe we need to tighten up the review of buffer yards.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to note that not every property is shaped the same.
Sure.
So when we're looking at front versus rear yard versus side yard, I think that needs to be able to be defined
Sure.
as in what is a front yard, what's a side yard, what's a rear yard. I mean, in corners, it's going to be a lot different than it is in a typical square parcel.
Yeah, and I think the Planning Commission with Robert's help did a really good job doing actual pictures in the zoning ordinance now of corner lots, through lots. It's a beautiful example, I believe, of how to show the public and educate the public on how to do it. So yeah, I think I can definitely bring attention to that moving forward. And yeah, that's my opinion. What do you guys feel? The same way, or
Yeah.
you feel we have a strong buffer ordinance? Is there anywhere in particular you want to improve it or not improve it? I mean, what are your thoughts?
The only thing I would say is, I would certainly welcome any comments from the county, or I guess, you know, looking at other municipalities. I'm a big fan of what everybody else is doing. I think as long as we're in line with what other municipalities, either here on the East Shore or on the West Shore, have, like you said, I don't know that there's any glaring deficiencies in it, but if there's anything specific or recent that you would be aware of from, you know, being involved in local organizations and hearing what other townships are doing, certainly feel free to raise those questions or bring those to us. Like you said, when kind of, I think last year we had done it, you know, kind of going through and doing a package of a bunch of text amendments and things that are commonly, waivers are either asked for or some things that we're commonly seeing, trying to update our codes to make it a little bit easier for us. If there's certain things you see, then by all means, let us know and we can kind of review those when we go through a package of a bunch of minor changes.
Sure. I believe there's,
Yes.
I was wondering, back to your flood zone, what was your final kind of synopsis about going forward with what you will be approving? Like, what's going to meet the requirements for you guys to approve the things in the flood zone future-wise? And, like, I guess what we learned here in the law section.
sure. So the state and the federal government gives a lot of jurisdiction to the municipalities. They create a model ordinance for municipalities, and the municipalities can't go lesser, but they can go more stringent. So one example I stated for here, I wanted to bring up Wawa in particular due to the floodplain issue. The township could have and still can enact stricter requirements that state that you cannot build in the floodplain period understory. So that's something the township can do moving forward. You know, that unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to think of it, it would have prohibited the Wawa at this location. But if you think of an environmental aspect, maybe that would have been a good thing. You know, I don't know how to put it the other way. You know, it depends on how you feel about development in particular. But the township can enact stricter standards. It'll be one of my recommendations moving forward when we have basically every 10 years FEMA updates maps, and then they provide us a new template. So the township could enact stricter requirements.
Yeah, and I think they're coming out pretty soon.
Soon, yeah, very soon.
So you're saying that's specific language related to building in floodplains, not
Correct.
just releasing a new version of updated mapping?
Correct.
What's
Yeah.
suggested, what's recommended, what's a no-no, what's not
Exactly.
a no. This is now what we plan for and how we, you know, get out of X, Y, Z, da-da-da-da.
Exactly.
Stormwater drain,
Yep.
da-da-da-da.
Yeah, and it's very closely tied to the flood insurance rate. And so in terms of whether or not you can get the flood insurance program or whatever for the homeowners who would participate, because you could certainly opt out of it all and not do it. Nobody really does, but then your citizens wouldn't qualify to get flood insurance. You'd leave your community exposed to that.
And that's actually brings up a good point. I won't go too far into the discussion, but we are into some intense talks with PEMA right now on some floodplain violations on the river. So there is a chance where the township could lose their flood insurance. So the township's taking that very seriously, and we are enforcing the current rules in the books. So, and they are very strict with that.
That's the big hammer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's basically the carrot and the stick. They can take away flood insurance for, you know, hundreds of properties in your township, which will be detrimental to the properties that are within the floodplain. So, Commissioner Tucky, I believe you had.
Yes.
I remember this plan being in front of us, and everyone had concerns about the gas tanks and everything else. And that was all kept in mind. I mean, it wasn't like it was just thrown together through this board. I remember having plenty of meetings here with you, and all that was looked into thoroughly. And we made sure that it wasn't going to be an issue with the environmental impact. There's special security features with the gas tanks and everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Florida, these different areas that get hit with hurricanes. I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of disasters that happen, and they have gas stations in those areas and stuff, and it's protected because there's different precautions they do when they're building all this. even the building itself, that's towards the creek. That building, from memory, what, it was like 6 or 8 foot high, where it can't leak, water can't leak into the building, from memory?
I
It's like
don't,
almost like water.
I don't recall exactly what.
It is
So
something like that.
basically what our ordinance reads now, they only have to put it up to the flood level, the flood elevation. But I think you're right. I think they did go above that, which they, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, from memory, it was a good 6, 8 foot high to make sure if it would happen where the water level came up, it was going to be protected. So it's not like this plan was just thrown together and just put out there and no one thought about the environment. This board did, our board did, and that's all I have to say. I mean, and then not only that, the turning lane from the bridge coming down, that was something that pretty much all of us insisted to have done for safety. And that part definitely does help the area from what it used to be with when it was originally just houses. But from that bridge going down, you have that extra turning lane going in. Thank you.
Sure.
Somebody had made a comment about some of the lighting on the previous plan on 322 is too bright. This is a 24-hour facility in the mixed-use area. Are there any bright light restrictions for this?
That's actually a really good question. So our ordinance does have cutoff shield requirements for various lighting. I did not review the plan, so I can't promise you that it was included. We technically, if it's not included in the plan, we can't make them change the plan, but I'm hoping that it was enforced.
I think I had come up at one point, and I think kind of our standard, looking at the cutoff shields that are usually the application in this case. I think that was looked at, but I can't say for certain.
They're two of the main things. Landscaping and lighting are really important to look at on plans.
So lighting is, not to get too much off topic, I guess just one final thought. Certainly if there's more regulations or recommendations coming down from the feds as far as building in flood zones, I think it would definitely be worth the discussion, because I can't say that we've had that amongst the board when I've been on, or amongst the planning commission when I've been on, so I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Lighting is an interesting topic as well. I know the one time it came to mind was when Faulkner was proposing their lighting, and they had what seemed to be extremely bright conditions, and if you've driven by it at night, they are extremely bright based on, when I questioned them, that's how car lots are designed. So they could prove with their lighting plan through their photometric analysis that it wasn't going to spill over onto another property, but there's really no maximum level within their site that there's really no restrictions on the maximum level. As long as they can prove that it doesn't affect neighbors, it's not necessarily the effect of you driving down the road and seeing it. It can be as bright as they want, which I don't know.
I think that actually ties in perfectly though what we're discussing.
Yeah.
Buffering and landscaping.
Yeah.
I don't think Faulkner has any buffering.
No, I mean, they're in a unique situation. Yeah, they're along Paxton Street, along 83. Obviously, they like that from the visibility standpoint, but it is like it's like daylight out there. What's that? Yeah, it
I
is.
wonder if the planes get confused.
But, I remember bringing that up at the public meeting, or at the planning commission meeting, and they kind of, said, yeah, that's the levels that calls for in, design of car dealerships, because they want to see their inventory displayed day or night. But there was nothing really in our ordinance that said you couldn't do it that way, as long as you could prove that your neighbors right next door weren't going to be adversely affected.
Sure. All right, you want to move on?
Sure.
All right, so we got other business A completed. It sounds like there's consensus from the planning commission that our current buffer yards and planting screens are appropriate at this time.
Good job.
All right, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for those examples.
Excellent.
Again, if there's, like Katie said, if you have a checklist or something that,
Yep.
a couple of things you want to highlight, or even if it's putting those in your summary, that you've been doing for us related to zoning and codes,
Sure.
we can certainly try to focus on that more.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about data centers, and I wish Commissioner Zubek wouldn't have left, because I wanted to question her on one thing that she said. She stated she didn't have any particular areas, and Commissioner Tucky, I think you said the same thing. But in her email that she sent to me today, it specifically recommended data centers permitted in commercial and industrial zones. So I'm a little confused on, she said that said that they didn't make any recommendations, but she specifically said commercial and industrial. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, to try to help alleviate Commissioner Zubek's concerns, that why did we make a recommendation to put it in the mixed use only and not in the commercial and industrial zones? So I wanted to kind of highlight I'm going to kind of explain to the best of my ability of why staff recommended having the data center use specifically in the mixed use district. So going back before the map amendment was approved, there was 3 properties that were mixed use within the jurisdiction. 2 of those properties were owned by one entity, which was the golf course, the Highlands Commons, and it was the authority, I believe, that owned the property at the time. And then one property, I don't know if people can see my little mouse here at the top, is owned by a separate parcel or property owner called Mr. Navarro. He was proposing some townhouse or apartment complex at one point, but he withdrew it. So staff, we took a good look at this. We were asked by our board to kind of figure out, where's the best location in the township to put possible data centers. Because if you don't have it, when we had this conversation, if you don't have it in one zoning district, it can be permitted anywhere. So Mr. McNaughton up here, the northern property in the RS, which definitely has room for data centers, could have put it there. Right now it's empty. So that could have been a spot. Mr. McNaughton could have said, hey, you know what? They're going to give me a bunch of money. Let's put a data center there. And the township would have had no protections whatsoever. So Commissioner Connolly was concerned about that and asked me to do a review of the ordinance to see, where are my recommendations. I was just hired here, so I was a fresh set of eyes. I didn't know any of the property owners or anything. So my recommendation was to look at the agricultural area on the eastern side of, 322 or 283, sorry, I can't read that. Because even if we just allowed data centers in this one mixed use area, it could have and it would have been considered spot zoning. Someone could have easily sued the municipality, in my opinion, and stated, hey, yes, you do allow it somewhere in your municipality. However, it is so restrictive, we still can't put a data center on there because there's only 2 property owners that own it. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that correctly? Doesn't make sense?
I guess the only question I have is how we ever ended up with that mixed use.
You know what? For here,
In the first place, I guess that was the only question of my argument on why we couldn't have just that.
why we couldn't just allow the data center there?
Right. If that was a problem from a zoning legality standpoint, how did we ever end up with mixed use on 3 parcels in the first place, I guess was the...
That's a good question. Do you know the answer to that?
I don't think Mr. Bowser may.
If my memory serves me correctly, wasn't that a farm that was designated as farm before when Bethlehem still owned it? Part of that was all farm up in there.
The golf course.
Yeah. And they came in and said they wanted to put the golf course in, and we came back with a counter proposal and said, no, we would prefer you to go with housing. And they said, no, the golf course was going to make them a whole bunch of money, bring a lot of tax revenue into the township. So it got approved. 10 years later, I had a meeting with them, and they told me that the Dauphin County Loan Development and the board over that golf course said that they were losing money on that piece of property, and that they wanted to sell it, and did they have our support to sell it? And I said, well, what do you want to do with it? Well, we're going to go out on RFP to see exactly what interest is there for that property. So here we are 15 years later, now they're coming in and saying, well, we're still having problems. Now at the time, they owed $5 million. They were $5 million in debt. You would think in 15 years they would have brought that debt level down, that they didn't have to sell it, okay? And we got comfortable with the property being there. Because one of the concerns we have, I happen to live out in that area, but one of the concerns we have is 3 Mile Island and our exposure, because it's a great exposure. I said emotionally the last meeting, one of the concerns that I have and some of the residents there is a lot of people died from cancer after 3 Mile Island. The question is, with that much high voltage coming up there, what could be some of the safety or the hazards of having something like that up there? We're not just fighting or against it just to be against it. The question is, what is the health effects? Also, the other question is, what that amount of building up there and stuff like that, how's that going to look right next door to a residential area? Okay. In my mind, I'm like, a lot of the people who made those decisions or trying to make those decisions are not keeping in mind how the people that live out there that have to live with this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So why was the mixed use added there though?
Okay, I'm sorry, I kind of got off track. But the mixed use came in there. I believe that if I remember, the owner requested to do the mixed use.
To kind of give them more.
To give him more, right. I tell you, at one point they were talking about, I knew I had to going back 15 years. Okay, but what they were talking about too was maybe doing a development and then putting some light warehousing there, and also doing some on the lower part, doing some office type things. Okay, there was also a possibility that somebody might be interested in putting a hotel or motel up there. Okay,
so they were trying to open it up.
So they were opening it up to draw people, developers' attention. Okay. One of my concerns, though, and again, that's going off. But one of my concerns as a commissioner is we're not paying. We're reacting. We're having people come in and tell us what they want us to do, what they want to do with property that's in the township to a large extent, especially with these last properties that are available out here. And I'm just a little concerned about that. I just would like us to sit down and plan it. If it happens, it happens. But to throw it on us and say react to it right away, that's what I'm opposed to, because I think we may be rushing into something that's probably what the last 15, 20 years, 25 years, then they'll fold up and something else is going to come up. Everything's going to go to the cloud now, or somewhere else. I don't know, but whoever thought that something like this would even be considered 25 years ago? I don't really know.
While Mr. Bowser was recalling that, I found a story, and a news story that the golf course was losing money, as he said. The authority attempted to sell the golf course in 2008, but it didn't happen. In 2009, they thought they had a potential deal and it fell through. And then in July of 2010, Swatara Township enacted a new mixed-use zoning designation for the property that permits residential, commercial, and light industrial uses. Previously, the 230 acres of Dolphin Highlands were zoned commercial general. So it says that under this new designation, the buyer or potential buyers would have a lot more options and maybe more marketable. So the county was the owner then. As he said, they were losing money and they were looking to see what they could could do, and ironically, the sale price would have been significantly lower than $46 million. But I just want to add one thing in here. When this discussion came up in the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners, everybody was going back and forth. We had one consideration. In fact, we had asked Zach, and Commissioner Zubek had asked in a public meeting, but collectively, we wanted to identify places where a data center could go. And looking back now, we had this all wrong. We looked for places that had open space because we thought they were going to need 80 acres minimum. So we started to look, where are there 80-acre places that aren't built out? So we thought we had protections built in. But we see now that they have so much money that they could have bought the mall and leveled it. They could buy anything. They could buy, just say they were looking to go where the Walmart and all those stores are. We thought they wouldn't go there because there was something there. But when they offered $46 million for something that was probably assessed in the $6 to $8 million range, it has completely changed the ballgame now. And the fact that we have those two gray areas to put them in seemed like it was the best idea at the time because you had some open space. But thinking about it now, with that kind of money, they could buy an area in the township that we think is undevelopable because it's occupied. They will just clear the land. I mean, to spend that much money. So I just want to go back to, appreciating Robert had started this, and there were conversations like those text amendments. This was actually, I want to say like what was it called? Swatara Rising 2025. So it's been a lot of years. In 20, when Robert started this in 19, no one was talking about data centers. They weren't talking about data centers in 20, 21, 22, 20. By the time we got to the end of 23 and into 24, they were on the radar. And communities were concerned about putting in protections for, there was fear about hearing the stories about the early data centers had problems. And at the same time, they were saying they were working everything out. We don't believe everything a developer tells us in any case. But all of those areas, and Zach said, and I know Commissioner Tucky said the opposite of this, and maybe he was confused or he wasn't listening, but in our meeting, Commissioner Zubek read that, and she said, so if you capture her, it'll be on YouTube, during her commissioner's comments, she said, and it would make a lot of sense for some uses, but she said in the commercial and industrial zones, and those are the 5 colors above the gray MU. So you're talking the violet, the other purple, I'm not good at this, the red checks and the red stripes. That covers an incredible amount of the township. And I get that, some people are interested in development and we'd like to open up the township. But we got a lot of pushback by putting it in those 2 gray areas. I can't imagine every place that you see that's purple or red or violet or red check, that is the heart of the township. And I feel like it's the same thing that we just saw in the news in Hampton. It's extensive, it's unpredictable, it's near our residents, it's near our shopping, it's near everything. And we got pushback on those 2 gray spots when we were putting it in to protect the other areas. So, I don't know where the discussion's going to go, but we very clearly have at least one commissioner who was interested in expanding it. I think whether a data center comes or not doesn't really matter to me. The golf course is fine, the Stein Farm is fine. But to add any more places at this point, we should be adding regulations, and that's what we got from the commissioners in general. That's what this board should be looking at. That's what Zach had. That's what Mrs. Loftus had presented us with. So. I think, to be clear, that the direction we're going is to put restrictions and requirements on those 2 gray areas that match today's standards and, all the things that we can do. And we just heard other speakers say that you don't want to tell people what to do on their property. I think that's our job. I think we need to tell people there's certain things they can do and they can't do within reason, but I'm not really for adding any of those other colored areas. I mean, and at the time I thought we had the protection that it couldn't go there because there was something there. I'm not that confident right now. If there, we obviously have the power grid close by that has attracted their attention. They have 2 spots. And if they can make it work, we'll put regulations on to make it work for us. If they can't make it work, I am not for adding all those other areas into play. And I think that was where the main discussion between Zach and I was going, and to put that out there to you, that we've had a request, basically, or at least a proposal, an idea to expand.
Was that around the same time that the zoning change was being made? Because I know that was initially discussed. What's that?
And power grid, you meant?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, the discussion on the appropriateness of data centers in some of the other areas, because I think there was some disagreements in what we were looking, or I guess maybe it was more of a rebuttal to what Zach was saying as far as, well, if mixed use is going to, having just a few parcels of mixed use was going to cause a problem from a zoning standpoint, then what if we considered putting it in another area? I think as a planning commission, maybe we disagreed with the decision to roll the zoning map change on the right side of 283 in with the data center being allowed in mixed use. I think that was where having those together kind of made it a little bit difficult for us to come to a consensus, and I think ultimately disagreed with the final decision on that, rightly or wrongly. I think that's where at least my, kind of going back to what you said, on that discussion, it at least seemed reasonable at the time to look into commercial and industrial zoning if that was a solution to not rezoning the big ag area next to 283. Like you said, as you learn more, yeah, maybe looking into other zoning districts aren't the case. I would say personally now, the fact that the decision has been made to have 2 parcels of mixed use, I think that's, appropriately accounting for data centers within the township. I don't know personally that I would want to look further. I would have said looking further would have been back at that decision-making time to.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, and I like the fact that you took a look at that, because we had an agriculture, but as Zach said, and Robert was involved in the legal review, was that just having one probably wasn't enough. So, like you said, you guys looked at it, all those things were on the table then, but we were also racing against time. We knew someone was out there with this incredible amount of money that was looking in this area. So we wanted to at least get that in. So I'm not referring to that. That was last year, and that was due diligence, and we all took turns at that. I'm talking about on September 3rd, a month ago, at our commissioners meeting, and whatever was submitted today is asking to put it in the commercial, and I believe the wording was industrial, but our industrial is manufacturing. So it's very similar to what happened in Hampton, adding zoning. So I just wanted to hear from the public. I mean, I don't, that's not something that I'm really getting outside of the commissioners meeting and what one commissioner submitted. And it just concerns me now that that opens up the map to 5 zones.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were really concerned. We were looking for properties that would have the least abutting residential districts. So I know we got some pushback. I know the Planning Commission initially rejected, I think it was 4-1 vote regarding the data center map amendment. But, truthfully, we were just looking for properties that had the least amount of residential abutting properties. I know there's going to be winners and losers everywhere, anywhere you go. And I know there's residential properties specifically related to the golf course on the northern eastern boundary. However, you have to think on the south side of that, it's a quarry. It's a massive hole. So, and on the eastern portion here, where it was just the zoning was just changed. There's only 1, 2, 3, less than 10 residential properties. I know these are some residentials here, but a 10 or 12, that's a whole lot better than putting it in, CG, where there's all these abutting residential properties, or, you know, CL, ML in particular, and CG in particular, there's just so many residential abutting properties. So I know it was a tough decision. I think we made the right decision. I would stick behind my recommendation, but it sounds like maybe now, looking back, you guys supportive of this area, or should we continue to look?
I mean, I think personally, we've accommodated data centers now with that decision from the Board of Commissioners that we've got it in use now. I don't personally think expanding it makes sense unless we really want a lot of data centers in the township. The only other area I would have looked at that kind of counter your argument would have been was at the MG. I think it's buffered by the darker purple. That's buffered by the CG and the ML. That would have been another option potentially if we were trying to not do the zoning map change. But I guess that being said, that's over and done. The question you're asking, I don't think looking at other zoning areas are necessary at this point, but I'm only one person as well.
Mr. Chairman, is it actually over and done, or because we're having a discussion here tonight?
They're permitted by right now within those.
Okay.
Within the MU, yeah.
Right, those MUs. So I guess, just to clarify from the outset, because I don't know exactly what we were trying to focus on with the discussion, but I guess maybe that's the first question, and I guess the latter part of our discussion is going to be what potential restrictions or what additions to the code we would want to add.
Yeah, so part one is just what Commissioner Connolly said. You know, we were rushing time to make sure that we had some kind of protection in place. So we wanted to make sure we weren't going to get sued for spot zoning right away. So we designated a second area. I'll try to explain a little bit better. So only over the golf course, there was only 2 property owners for the mixed use in general. So one can make an argument per our solicitor. They reviewed it and they said somebody could still sue the township in saying that you're still prohibiting data centers because only 2 property owners own the parcels which you designated as data center parcels. Does that help explain? So we expanded it to make more property owners so we couldn't get sued to saying it's spot zoning. You okay? Bless you. Did that help, ma'am? A little bit? None? In the pink? Did it help? Okay.
Commissioner Tucker.
Yes. What Commissioner Zuback second. I'd like you to read the first part of what you stated.
Yes.
Completely.
So in the first paragraph?
The first part where you're coming up with
Yep.
where we have all these
There.
data centers, that wasn't happening.
There, yes, it is. There are many things we should have considered before the zoning change, but there is still time to address many concerns. Rather than just changing the zoning, we could have specified that data centers are conditional use only permitted in commercial and industrial zones, like some of our neighboring municipalities.
And
We can require data center developers to go through a special exception hearing before the zoning hearing board or conditional use before the board of commissioners.
Yeah, there was more to it than that.
Well, I could
It's
read
not that she-
5 pages.
It's not, there was more to it than what was being presented tonight.
So was she asking, and I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, was she asking, she was suggesting that we should be looking at changing it to a different zoning district than is currently permitted now?
That's my
Since it was already done, it's kind of like it's an afterthought, unfortunately, now, because it was pushed so quickly. That's how I'm taking it. And the way it was presented tonight is not 100% accurate. She's not saying that she wants to move forward and pushing it in other areas at all. And she's saying special exception, having it goes in front of the special hearings.
The zoning hearing board or the board of commissioners.
So if it would be allowed or not allowed at that point. But she's not.
We'll get the meeting online, and then people can hear what she said rather than what he said.
No, it says it right there.
Yeah.
No, but that's in writing, but she read it in a public meeting so everybody can hear it. You're saying what someone else said at that.
But I think to bring us back on.
That is stated clearly and completely.
to bring us back on track, are we intending to change our zoning district at this point that warehouses are permitted? And I guess
Well,
is the question. And
it would be my recommendation that we do not put it in industrial or commercial zones, even if it's special exception or conditional use, or permitted by right. I wouldn't recommend we get into the commercial or industrial because it's surrounded by residential properties.
okay.
I think we made the right decision, but that's a decision the board can make, and the planning commission can make a recommendation as well. Do you believe, I mean, just so we're clear, do you believe that we should look into the commercial and industrial zones? Because I do have to make a presentation tomorrow night too.
I don't think. I mean, I'll defer to input. I've been doing all the talking on the planning commission. I'll defer to anybody else in the planning commission what our thought is.
I don't think it's necessary.
No, I think if we're not rehashing the history of how it's in mixed use, I think with the current zoning designation, I think is appropriate for the opportunities for data centers in our township. I don't know that we need to expand.
I guess my question would be, why would we?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a question we'll ask Commissioner Zubek tomorrow night.
And maybe
She'll be better able to explain herself.
Maybe some clarification on that. Like, would the request be to undo what was done before and look
Right.
elsewhere? If that's the case, maybe that's a different discussion than expanding. But I can't speak to either of those. But yes.
But if you do that, that delays the whole process, basically. If we undo.
Well, yeah, you can do whatever you want,
No,
but
I'm asking you the question. I'm saying, if we undo the process, then that starts you all over.
it does.
Start all over.
It would start you at the beginning of the process.
Yeah, I don't know that I would be in favor of that now that it's done. I think, obviously we're the advisory board. We're not the ones making the tough decision of, the final legal decision of changing a zoning map. So I'm not going to try to second guess the decision that was made there. So I think in light of where we're at now, I think it's appropriate and covers the opportunities that we have. I'm sorry, you were.
Okay, I wanted to know, the federal guidelines for data centers, do they have additional restrictions that the township could add in as their own restrictions?
I think that's kind of the second part of our discussion that we're going to get to in terms of so if you've got the zoning map piece of it and then you've got the zoning code piece of it, what kind of restrictions? Once you've said where they can go, then you've got the piece of what they can look like, what they need to do, that sort of thing.
Whether or not they comply with the federal guidelines, because
there's obviously the permits that they need to get. We've talked about as far as floodplain permits, you've got DEP, but there's not specific requirements related to data centers that I'm aware of.
Correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
specifically about potential safety issues having them close to residential areas. So I'm assuming that the federal guidelines account for that.
I don't believe
I don't
there
believe
are
at
any.
this point there are at this. It's such a new.
Problem with,
Right, that's a national level that there's not been standards, there's not really been studies that I'm aware of.
So
Correct
at
me if I'm
what point
wrong.
will they be done? I mean, does the data center have to show up with a proposal and then the township decide whether or not it's safe?
Well,
Really, what else?
I think it kind of goes back to almost any land use decisions and how it's made in Pennsylvania and the United States. The government has given the states the rights to make rules, and then the states give the local municipalities the right to make rules. When it comes to land use, so whether or not it's a farm or a business or a data center, that right pretty much is on the local municipalities. The federal government doesn't really state too much talking about certain things. There are certain things that require more intense scrutiny, such as nuclear power plants, some chemical type of things, but the majority of all the decisions are in this room right here. And that's the way the situation comes down to.
I read brought up nuclear power, is that also?
Well, that's
not approved by local
well, that's such a.
That's a well-documented threat to humans.
Well, yes, and there is the federal regulations on nuclear power and how they're run. So there are certain things that a local municipality could not have the resources to figure out how to do nuclear power. But in a case like the data centers and things like that, they're going all over the country, and the guidance is kind of down to the local municipality. If they feel that the local municipalities can make these decisions on where they're supposed to be, because it is a local land use decision more than a national one that has intense scrutiny.
It's side by side with residences, the residents are also.
Well, that's why the discussion is so strong tonight. Is where do you put the warehouses? Where do you put the commercial businesses? Where do you build the Wawas? But it's also in the same vein. Where do you put these data centers that really nobody knows what they are too much because they're brand new? And then how do you figure out what regulations are reasonable and which ones aren't reasonable?
I think the recent occurrence of fracking in Pennsylvania has also brought to mind a lot of concerns for local people, because those things were also pushed through without any proper environmental studies.
Well, yes, and in that case, that's one of those.
State,
Yeah, that's another level of some of the environmental concerns that are done with some land uses that aren't at a local level.
And
that are taken away.
That's a good segment in what I wanted to talk about next. So, Commissioner
Ellis had
Oh, sure.
comment, yeah.
With regard to the mixed use area, I looked it up, and the county bought the golf course, or that area in 1993, I believe. I saw.
It was 93. They actually, they didn't buy it, they financed it.
Okay.
They financed
Just
it.
they became the property owner.
Yeah, they became, but they had lien on that
And
property.
it did say this, what you said,
Yeah.
that from Bethlehem Steel, from what I saw. And
It-
then 1995 is when the golf course was developed. So
Yeah.
if you're saying within 10 years, then it would have been around 2005 that they were having
Somewhere, they were
financial
having
issues.
financial issues.
And we said that that was the only property that was mixed use in the entire township. So I don't know if it's something that you guys can look, because I'd be interested in the history of how that happened anyway.
What you mean, how that golf course
How that
got there?
became mixed use at all.
It was because Bethlehem Steel put the property up for sale. This was my understanding. I was on at that time. They came before the board and they said, we want to sell the property and we have a potential, meaning, right, and they had someone who wanted to build the golf course. We really didn't want that on either, because we got used to, I'm talking about the people who live there, okay?
Yeah.
We got used to that farmland being there, okay, and Bethlehem still being hidden back here. It was just a little small clubhouse type
I
thing.
vaguely remember.
Okay, but every year, they were growing crops right up, coming up that hill and everything. So we were happy with that. We just didn't want to see, we thought the golf course might create a problem with traffic and the whole bit. Because they were talking about bringing in national stuff and stuff like that. So really, I think the whole issue that came up was really, they really didn't promote that golf course. There was a lot of money put in there. And the people that designed that golf course was one of the tops. Okay, but the whole intent was to bring a lot of the regional stuff to that course. And it really wasn't promoted. And from what I understand, I'm not a golfer, but a lot of people tell me the cost to tee off is kind of high. So that didn't help matters out, okay? But like I said, when they came and met with us or talked to us about maybe selling that property, the whole issue was about the money, okay? They wanted to get rid of that debt, okay?
Do you have any, what was it, do you know when it was zoned prior to it becoming mixed use? I know it was a long time ago.
I can't, when Bethlehem still owned it, I don't remember. I can ask someone who might know, okay, that's been around.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
But they owned that property for a long time, okay? In fact, on the back part, the president or the Bethlehem still, there's a home back there. I don't know if they tore that down or not, but that's where that person lived. Okay.
So most likely then the change would have been right before 1993 range.
Yeah.
To change the zoning. Okay, so that narrows down the.
But we
Well, I
changed it,
think-
we changed the zoning for them to build that golf course in there.
I think that kind of
So
covers
then it
most
would
of
be
the
between
topic.
93 and 95 range.
Yeah.
But still, that narrows down
Yeah.
the attempting to figure that out significantly.
So according to the article that Commissioner Conley had read, just according to my notes, it was in July 2010 that Swatara Township enacted the mixed use for the property and converted it from commercial general to mixed use.
Excuse me, that was the time that they met with us, and they just met with me. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to put it out there for bid for somebody.
Meaning the
else.
county.
Yeah.
The county wanted to put it out
the
there.
county.
That's what clarified the
Township
county.
definition about what a data center is, like where we can allow, we don't currently have language saying that we can or cannot have
We
data
do.
centers.
We do.
We do. It's in mixed use. Currently, it's in mixed use. That was the first part of the discussion. Currently, it's in mixed use. The two dark gray. There are no special conditions or anything at this point on that. I think that's the second part of our discussion. We were going to try to segue in,
Yes.
I guess.
Yep.
In the interest of time, if you want to.
Yeah, just,
that, Zach.
yeah, well-
Unless anybody's got an appetite to talk further zoning districts.
If I may.
Yes.
I know data centers are new and they're all over the country. Has anyone looked or compared, looking at the different centers all over the country, things that have come up as issues at other data centers, since there are no federal guidelines?
Yeah, and they're gonna change the name, they have branches of lawyers, they're, they call it server farm, data center, whatever they call it. We, instead of looking at restrictive language of this is allowed, this is not allowed here, at X, Y, Z, perhaps we should be tying everything health as well to how much these resources they're going to need, including to the tap on the grid, the tap on the water supply, and all of the, how many jobs are created and the wage of that employee. There are mathematic formulas. If they're using so much energy with maybe 3 jobs per se, they're paying X amount of dollars. And this would be able to then therefore call it anything they want to call it, data center, battery center, but they cannot be using an extreme and excessive amount of energy and resources from the township that they are claiming.
So I think that's a perfect segue.
That's the
Yeah.
point I think Zach was getting to
Yep.
in the discussion in terms of some of the things to consider outside of just where you put them, what you're talking about, the environmental impacts,
Yes.
the
I
dating
just
to
want to answer
energies.
the question
Yes.
was yes. Through the process, our legal staff looked around the township, knowing that this was an area of desire for that. But yes, they did compare and look at other things and did extensive research and then came up with at least the beginning guidelines. And part of the reason you see those two gray areas is because that's where the transmission lines for PP&L are already built and located. There's also water and sewer sources there, and there's fiber that they need, which is apparently underground, and there's a lot of it that comes up in those locations. So if they were to build, just say in the purple color in the middle, they'd have to then bring all those things to the site. Now you're disrupting everyone along the way. So one of the discussions we had is it's almost like if those two gray areas were the places that had gold or oil, and you could mine it or drill for it there, you don't want them drilling for it in the middle of the purple and then running underground all the way to there. So that they were exactly what you said.
I understand
was
that,
part
that
of-
wasn't my question.
What was your question?
My
Did anybody
question-
research it?
Did anybody research the problems or
Yes.
or things that other data centers across the country might have encountered? They already have the centers, so they have a little bit of history with the centers.
Right.
Is there anyone studying or looking or
I'm
comparing?
hoping that's what Zach will
And that's what
get
Zach
to.
is going to
That's what
Yeah.
he's going to get to in terms of
So-
when you looked at some other areas.
Yeah.
We've also been wrestling with the same topic.
So I'm going to try to, I know it's almost 9 o'clock, so I'll try to speed it up a little bit, but Zoe Loftus, provided us the 3-page document of, her research, Commissioner Zubek also provided me, and she read it out in public last week, I believe, or the month before or something, and she also provided to me. But I'll kind of do a synopsis of some recommendations and why some of them can't be implemented. So Zoe recommended, I believe Commissioner Zubek too, of a potential 500-foot buffer from residential properties, and then equipment buffer of 300 feet. So I used to work in Loudoun County, Virginia, the data center capital of the world. And data centers, they do not want to be next to a house. They don't want to be next to a street. They don't want to be next to anybody. They're going to put barbed wire fences up. They're going to have security. They want to be as far away from anybody as possible because they can have contracts with the federal government, state governments, national security. So it's very, very secure. So regarding the buffers, regarding the two areas in particular that we have designated as the data center locations, the 300 and 500 feet, that's going to be so easy for them already to voluntarily come into agreements with, because they're going to be located closer probably to the southern end. Just say for example, the golf course, they're going to be located in the southern end because they're going to want to be away from the road. So it's already going to be 500, 600 feet away from anything. So we can add those restrictions in. However, I think they're going to be irrelevant because of the location in particular to the residences existing. Also regarding water feasibility studies, municipalities in Pennsylvania do not have that jurisdiction. That jurisdiction is solely with Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. So we can't make stricter requirements than the state does. That's just the state laws. Same thing goes with the sewer. Sewer is 100% dictated by Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. So if we put something more restrictive than state law into our zoning code, we're going to get sued and we're going to lose those lawsuits. So regarding water and sewer in particular, we don't have jurisdiction to add to our ordinances. They're already regulated by the state, and they'll have to get state permits for that. Same thing with electricity. We don't have the authority by Pennsylvania law to put restrictions on electric demand. That's something you have to talk to your elected leaders, not at the local level, but at the state level. They can put in restrictions regarding that. Will they? I don't know. But we can't put restrictions on any kind of usage for electricity.
That would be PUC.
Exactly. You're exactly right. So I think that covers everything for Zoe Loftus, because she had a water feasibility study, which we can't do. Mandatory water use reporting. If the state doesn't allow us to add those restrictions, what they don't, we can't add those. So any questions on sewer or water or electric?
Well, I guess the question I had, so I was looking, obviously, like I said, we're not the only municipality that is discussing this issue now. I noticed like the city of Lancaster's got a zoning ordinance related to data centers that addresses some of those topics. Like you said, there's a fine line of what a township can do. I guess some of the things they did mention in that draft ordinance, and certainly it's a draft,
Mm-hmm.
I think they said their solicitor prepared it last month. They're having public comment on it. They did request, and I could say, question maybe what it's worth ultimately, but they did say, they wanted an energy management plan submitted with the zoning application. They wanted a water utilization report. I guess that maybe gives a little bit more clarity on what kind of demand they're using, but obviously it's not a make or break.
Correct. We can ask for it, but we can't require it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I guess they're requiring it, but the language is, I guess I would say, vague enough. They say it's subject to review and comment by the city. Well, it means people get to see it. It doesn't ultimately say we're going to deny, the application because of the report. They basically would have to produce the report. I don't know. Maybe that does, add some value to be able to see what kind of demands are being used by the applicant. I'd be interested to hear what you know, some of those reports, what's the value in those? Like, is it worthwhile? Maybe it is to include something like that in our language that we can at least get a better handle on, you know, what's being used by a data center. Ultimately, it's not going to, you know, necessarily say it's not going to go in because of that, but it gives you a better idea. I don't know. I'd be interested for.
I think the sewer authority would be quite concerned because you have cooling towers over there, and they use chemicals. And the question is,
Well, it's all. My understanding is it's all evaporation for the cooling. It's not going. It's the water usage. Like that's the problem with the water usage. It's all evaporating for the cooling. It's not going back into being treated. Okay. It's all going into the environment. It's all evaporation. It's a heavy demand on your water system, but not your sewer system.
not your source.
Unless you're doing a recirculation, like a heat pump, where you're, you know, exchanging energy back into some sort of cooling system, where it'd be a closed loop.
Let me ask you a question: would maintenance be an issue of the equipment because of the high power equipment there?
I don't think we have jurisdiction in that though. Regarding maintenance of their own equipment, just like just like maintenance of a warehouse or any other building.
Well, that's a little different. When you have a high voltage, you have a lot of power coming through there.
I think it's regulated by the PUC, like you said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
PMJ has been dragging their feet recently with trying to update and adapt to the data center demands, looking particularly at Blanford, Virginia. And the PMJ is off, it's the Eastern Seaboard Grid. There's also the PNDJ, it's an extra initial, it's the one that has the 3 and the 3 and the 4. And they've been dragging their feet recently, but until representatives basically hold them to account, there has been little, movement in this direction, but this is exactly one of the case studies that could be propelled to be able to force PMJ to start racking in their rates and their usages off of the grid, because they have just been able to kind of close door and close rank and proceed as normal. But it is coming, they said, within the next year or so. No.
So
Yes.
one more thing, because we're kind of running out of time. I wanted to talk about traffic as well. I think, as we all know, Commissioner Zubek said requesting more studies related to traffic. Our SALDO already protects us for that. Our SALDO requires that we have traffic impact analysis, and then if it meets a certain level, we do traffic scoping, and if it meets a certain level, then they're required to do any kind of improvements. The township is protected in that matter for traffic, and it's all dictated as well by PennDOT. So it's another state requirement that we'll have. If they come, they'll have to comply with PennDOT rules and regulations and our existing rules as well.
The only thing I would mention there is, and that's maybe a topic to add to the list of things to tighten up in our ordinance. I'd like to see more, like our traffic, we got challenged on it by, I think it was Chick-fil-A. It says a traffic report, but it's very lacking in details. That I would rather that we follow more of PennDOT's guide, to make sure that we follow more of PennDOT's guidelines for projects that aren't necessarily asking for a traffic impact study, or aren't required to have a traffic impact study because they're not along a state road.
I'm 10 steps ahead of you. I already have that in my draft.
Okay.
Yep.
That's something I would have liked to see to cover ourselves for some of those cases where we might not be accessing a state highway.
Yep. I already have that in our SALDO draft. Okay. Let's see. So we covered all that. One more thing I wanted to talk about before I kind of open it up. Commissioner Connolly, everyone always asks, well, how much are these data centers going to bring? So the commissioners, I did believe, asked our solicitor to come up with an estimate. And just keep in mind, this is an estimate, and it's only on real estate tax revenue. Commissioner Zubek was correct that we do have the business privilege tax. There is going to be earned income tax, but the residents, you have to be residents of the township to get earned income tax. There's going to be other small taxes as well, but the big money maker for the school district, the county, and for the municipalities will be the real estate tax. So So here's what Swatara could expect to receive from a data center. It doesn't matter where it's at, if it's on the golf course or the other building or the other properties. So the fair market value of one 100 megawatt data center building is between 700 million and 100 billion. So if we assume there would be 5 of those buildings on the site, which is pretty typical, that would be between 3.5 billion and 5 billion in fair market value for the total site. So just keep in mind that our current assessed value has decreased significantly due to the highway expansion project. Right now it's 1.57 billion. So it would raise, basically it would double and potentially triple, depending on how many buildings they put on a site. So a fair market value of 3.5 billion and you multiply that by our common ratio for Dauphin County. All the common ratios are different for every single county. You take 40% of your property value, and that's what you're taxed at in Dauphin County. So the assessed value would then decrease from 3.5 billion to 1.4 billion. The township's millage raised approximately 3.6473 mills, and you multiply that, that would equal about $5 million in revenue. So basically it will double and sometime maybe even triple the real estate tax revenues for the township. And then
That's per year?
That's per year, but we're just a tiny portion of the pie. The county gets an even larger portion of additional money, and then the school districts are really the big winners because there's not going to be any impacts to your schools. Extremely little impacts to the roads for the municipality. Extremely, if any, impact on police and fire. I spoke with our fire chief, and these systems are so advanced that if there's a fire within the facility, it will be put out before they even get called to the site. So this is something we wanted to throw out there. It's not all about the money, I understand that, but I know people were questioning like what kind of revenue could a municipality bring in. So we're just assuming, that was the low end of $3.5 billion of revenue, or fair market value. So any questions on revenue? And then we can get into what your recommendations are for ordinances.
The only thing I guess I would clarify is what you were saying, the township at 1.5 billion. That's the entire assessed value of the township currently.
The entire...
It would basically double that in one parcel.
One parcel, yeah.
I think that's what the dollar sign everybody's seeing, obviously, because it would essentially double the assessed value of our entire township.
Correct. Not just at one site, five buildings.
Which solicitor did that come from? Did that come from Wyland?
That came from our current township solicitor.
Was it input from Wyland?
I have no idea.
The reason I bring that up is because Wyland is the very one that pushes that. And I will quote at his LinkedIn, "When I am not practicing law full-time, I am active in developing data centers and energy generation projects." So it's one of those ones that whenever he came to one of the commissioners' meetings, he sat there and got really excited over it. Well, I can see why, because if you're sitting there making money off it, I'm going to tell you, man, you guys can't go wrong with data centers.
I think we're assuming that he's making money on this. So I don't want to put that out in the public that he's making money on this because I don't think anybody can confirm that. So I don't want to do libel. Yeah, I don't want to do libelous
He's got very
stuff.
good interest in it.
Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to say tonight. Is there any recommendations from this body?
I guess, and sorry to put you on the spot, Mr. Duke, but I guess the other piece of it too, I would say, obviously, we're not the only municipality within Dauphin County. Is there anything from the Tri-County region? I know I looked briefly on your website, there's kind of a 2-page fact sheet with some more generic pieces. I guess, in terms of looking forward, is there anything you're doing
at
the MPO level?
This conversation is happening within every municipality within Dauphin County. In fact, even last night we reviewed one for Gratz Borough. So, Gratz Borough has put one together because of their concerns up there because of the tie-in with solar power that's going up there and the availability of water. So I mean, and plus they're near a transmission line as well. Plus the rural areas are getting attention for crypto mining and data mining and things like that. So there's a lot of concern all over the place. We do not have a model because this thing is so fluid. There's so many parts to this thing, and it's as we're learning type of thing. We've been reaching out to Loudoun County itself, getting some more information about what they are doing. We look to mention of Hampton Township. Cumberland County has done a lot of work in advance. They do not have a model ordinance per se, but they do have components put together that one community can look at to kind of set up as the model for everyone's using. But everyone's having this same debate, this same thing. They're talking about, you know, the opportunities, but also what are the concerns of having something that is so new and so demanding on a lot of the resources. We're also in that situation that we, as the county, have to be careful because, you know, that's one of the properties within the county is the property that, you know, that certain parts of the economic development are looking at as well. So we have to be careful about making sure that everybody's interests, not to say that that's the most important thing, but again, every municipality is looking at how to make this work for everybody. The things that we see are the overruns, so to speak. You know, the noise, the sounds of the air conditioning units, the drain on the resources that are there, the lighting that is there, the look of the building. Those are the things that I think almost everybody's trying to look at ordinance-wise and what you're trying to control. And that's probably what any ordinance you follow into place will have that. And of course, as the main discussion tonight was where, you know, that's where you have to decide where the community is the best place to put it. I know you've already had the discussions on those mixed use, but should there be more? I think, as pointed out, they are looking at combining lots. They are looking at things that you would not normally see as just open fields. They are tearing down and they are combining. They are putting things together because the value is so there. Pretty much with the, you know, whenever they find a spot that is good, that has all the things that they want, buildings in their way is not something that, or lines on a parcel, are not something that really phases them too much. So
I think that's the one how the city of Lancaster didn't even have. It was a reuse of an existing large commercial parcel that basically was permitted by right without even needing a land development plan, I think, because of the way it was situated.
Within the city.
Our Donnelly plan, I think, if I'm correct in the location. Right. Like, I think that's maybe where some of the city's ordinances come out, because people, and rightly so, were like, how did this happen? Well, that's currently permitted by right and doesn't even undergo a land development plan in a situation where they just had a large vacant commercial parcel that someone could repurpose for.
And they're evolving in terms of what they are still,
right.
Because you would normally what you think of if you go down to the Loudoun, Virginia area in the industrial parks, they look like an industrial park and they're big buildings and things like that. Well, now they're evolving into smaller facilities that they don't need the 50 acres or 100 acres. They can squeeze them in on 20 acres and get done what they need, but they still have the same impacts on noise and looks and sounds and, you know, everything that goes along with the things that you want to control. So it doesn't necessarily match up to what your community wants to be. So.
At this point, I guess, where the MPO stands, is there any future in doing a model ordinance?
Yes. We've been talking internally about doing that. What the thing we have the problem with any kind of model ordinances is that, you know, we can give you something, but then you're going to have to decide whether it works or not. Mm-hmm. And we hate to just hand something to you and say, here, use it, because, you know, we really aren't the ones testing it as well as someone else is. So
you're covering a very diverse area within.
Right, and I think if you take it, you know, you had a long conversation about the buffers and things like that. We do have models on that, different things you can pick and choose on stuff, and I'm sure you're quite, in line with a lot of the things. But we are thinking that we may end up following in the footsteps of Cumberland and some of our other communities around, having a model that you could possibly look at to pick apart and say yes, no to different components of it. But I think if you find a lot of the things that are already out there in Loudon, that's a good base, or Loudon or Montgomery County or any of the DC areas, particularly, that's where this. If you take a look at where the maps are for everything that these things are happening, they're happening all over the country.
So, Mr. Chairman, it is getting pretty late. Do you want to have a continued discussion? If you guys want to think about some recommendations, I think it's probably would be awesome of the Tri-County to have some kind of a model ordinance for us to look at.
I think looking at what other municipalities are doing, kind of the best practices, what have been done to date, I think it would be helpful from the.
I wouldn't use graphs. Sorry.
I think some of the things that have come up, obviously, there's a limit to how much you can regulate in terms of energy, but I think not necessarily discussed at length, but like the noise piece of it, that is something that I know was in the city of Lancaster's model ordinance. I think it's in Loudoun counties, or I think when I looked briefly at Loudoun County, they were actually undergoing a rewrite of their ordinances at this time. I'm assuming because they've seen so much usage of their current ordinances, kind of going back and saying, well, what would we want to see differently moving forward? So I guess my thought would be kind of, if you've got some time to see, or if we as a planning commission have some time to see what's out there in terms of already enacted ordinances or draft ordinances, kind of doing a more, I would certainly think it would be helpful to do more review of some best practices and certainly consider some of these, adding some of the language to cover some of these topics related to data centers in our code.
Well, Loudoun County, they're a lot different because Virginia allows a lot more restrictions than Pennsylvania allows per the MPC. So they can, they can dictate down to a butterfly garden in Loudoun County.
When they tax they tax the equipment itself in terms of a revenue generator. Yeah, even within PA, like you said, if Cumberland County's done something and they're further along.
I think just thinking I know we had meetings just the other day with the other MPOs, and Lehigh Valley is getting a lot of attention for it as well. So I know the Lehigh Valley MPO is very close to publishing a model. So I do know that a lot of things are going to be out in the street in the next month or so that would be probably very, very helpful. And we can work with Zach and as we do with every community to try and get something on the books. I don't know if any of the other communities around here, I know South Hanover has looked at something. They were very close to doing something. I can't say whether, I think Lower Swatara, Londonderry, had something that was in the works. They had something floated and it was pulled back. So I know a lot of the municipalities around here are playing with different pieces of the thing to the ordinance to make it work.
Yeah, I think we can start by looking at Cumberland County and then Lehigh Valley and then go from there.
I think trying to look at some other examples and what other people are wrestling with, what comes up in your discussions with your peers, I think.
Yeah, I don't know, Zach, are you going to the PPA conference next week?
No.
Okay, there's a PPA conference coming up, and I think there's one or two sessions definitely on it, particularly on the data center.
I'm sure it's
so
a hot topic there.
I know I plan on going to that, so I can pull some stuff to do that as well.
Mr. Chairman, I believe he also had some other business if we're done with this one. You guys want to reach out to me?
What's that?
You want to reach out to me with some things that you guys view, see and you like, and then we can kind of go from there?
I think continued discussion of it, especially if, say, next month we've got a lighter docket in terms of plan reviews. I think continued discussion on this topic would be beneficial.
Sounds good.
A couple things going on. One of the things is kind of out there for the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission. One one of the things that we do every 10 years is modify our regional growth management plan. That's kind of one of the major planning components for highway designs and highway demand, such, and there is, the process is ongoing right now. If you go onto our website, there's a survey, and it's a visual preference survey of what kind of land development types you think you like and what kind of things you prefer. So kind of giving a sense of kind of matching up land uses compared to perceived versus what is going to be what you want to have type of thing. So
Is that open to the public or is
yeah, absolutely.
I know Zach, I believe, passed that on to the Board of Commissioners, but
Yeah, that's open to anybody.
try to
We're
publicize
looking.
that a little bit more if we can. Tri-counties.
Yeah, in fact, I said to Zach before the meeting, I'm going to send it to you, and then he can forward it to you so you can take it. It's open for another 3 or 4 weeks, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was helpful. I looked at it, I thought it was helpful seeing different pictures, examples of different zoning techniques or choices.
Correct, and that was modeled a lot after what the Cumberland County's comprehensive plan, how they did their outreach. On top of that, next year starts our Dauphin County's 10-year planning process. We're going to be working on our comprehensive plan. And so I talked to Zach initially. We're looking for having some people sit on our advisory committee for that. So if there's any interest from any of you who want to be part of the steering committee, in essence, we're certainly open to having you come on board. But that's going to start in January, so you'll probably hear me pester you more about that in the next few months. But right now, the regional growth management plan, please, if you can take that survey, that would be very, very helpful. And then you can follow up with more information as the process is happening.
Thank you for those updates at the county level. What's going on there? Is there anything else from your end, Zach? Nope. Any other commission members' comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight our next meeting is Monday, November 3rd, due to Election Day.
Yes. And is that taken care of? I believe there was a little bit of confusion.
I sat here and looked at you and said I had no other business, but thank you so much. I was going to say that our planning commission meeting is November 3rd and then December 1st for the following, and I did advertise that.
So Monday for the Monday for the next two meetings,
Yes.
due to Election Day and the Christmas tree lighting,
Yes.
I believe.
Thank you, Katie.
So,
Totally
yes,
forgot
thank
about
you
that.
for pointing that out.
Yep.
The one thing I did want to mention too, and I know it's come up before, our terms there's a fair number of whose terms are expiring at the end of the year, I guess. I don't know what the proper channel is, or I know there's several commissioners in the room, but I guess in terms of maybe considering how to stagger some of those better.
Yes.
How we reorder.
Yep.
I don't know if anything's been done, if we need to send a letter, that sort of thing.
No, it's already on our radar. We are aware that there's some issues with everybody's terms. I think except for Katie's term.
4 of us are 4
Yeah.
and 1.
I
Yeah.
tried to get it
Yep.
fixed like, I don't know, 2-3 years ago.
Okay.
Like,
As long as it's on your radar, then we'll stop bugging you about it.
It'll definitely be fixed, I promise you.
That reorganization, somebody
Yeah.
get a 4-year and somebody get a 2-year.
Right.
It probably should follow the election cycle for the commissioners, so that there's 2,
Yep.
and that there's 3, because in the past, newly elected person or re-elected person would have the opportunity to appoint. So if you don't follow that way, you could have a person, and they may, you could always reappoint the same person, but they wouldn't have a say in, you could have 2 people having 3 spots and 3 people having 2 spots. So
Yeah.
we already talked about that, and I'm sure we'll let everybody
And
know.
we'll stop bugging you about it.
Yep.
Any other
I'd say by
comments?
December 1st, we probably would have at least confirmed that's how the 4 spots will go.
Mhm.
Thanks for that update. Is there any other comments?
Make a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make a motion.
So moved. Oh, we have motion. You want a second?
A second.
All in favor? Aye. I'm sorry. Any opposed? Nay? Meeting is